Hey, it's Brian House here for Housework, and today I'm taking a step backwards. When I got into knife making, I actually wanted to learn how to make kitchen knives. I love to cook, so I really felt like having good cutlery made a lot of sense. It didn't really come to this conclusion until my mother-in-law gave me a Wusthof knife, and it was just glorious. Up until that point, I'd been just using cheap stainless steel stuff from Target and Walmart, whatever I could get my hands on, a lot of hand-me-down knives and such. So when I got my hands on that Wusthof knife, it really set sort of the bar for me for cutlery. It made me really want nice cutlery. And of course, as you dive into the idea of knife making, it seems very difficult, and it is. And I think that's partially the reason why I like it. So I made a bunch of kitchen knives, and this is not even all of them. This is just a handful of them. I probably made 6 or 8. If you've seen that video, this is the kitchen knife video that I made. These are all kind of an iteration of that same design. Here's another example of pretty much the exact same design, and this time I actually spent the time and energy to pour an epoxy resin handle and then inlay some pretty cool pieces of curly maple in there. It's a great design. It feels good in the hand. You know, it's got it feels powerful. You know, it's not too heavy, it's light. But there's one major problem with this blade, and that is its thickness, the spine and the thickness of the blade itself. When you cut with this, it cuts through initially, but then it sort of breaks everything apart halfway through because it's more of a wedge instead of a thin blade. So essentially I made a kitchen knife that's good for butchering. And I do not do a lot of butchering, actually. I do no butchering. So the problem with this is this is a beautiful piece of steel and epoxy and wood and all those things, but it doesn't really do what it's designed to do. It doesn't meet all my requirements. So if I'm going to spend all this time, let's just say in a knife like this, from design concept to pouring the handle to inlaying the maple and all that, I've got probably 15 hours invested in this. That's because I'm a novice. I'm just still learning, and eventually I'll get down a system and it'll speed up considerably. At some point you have to learn that no matter how much time you spend doing something, if it's not right, it's not right, and you have to go back and fix it. My wife, who is an artist, she had a college professor tell her, at some point you have to learn how to kill your children. What she meant by that is everything that you create, all of the things that you make, art, knives, whatever it might be, those are your children. You spend time doing it and they feel kind of like your kids. Well, at some point, if it's not right, something's wrong, you have to learn how to take them out. Today, I'm going to take a couple of these out. I'm not going to destroy them, I'm not going to kill them. That might seem a little dramatic because that's not what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to go back, cut the handles off, and thin these down. And the way that I came to this conclusion was, you know, I've been doing all that work with that A2 steel. That A2 steel, to me, is kind of like, take it or leave it. It's nice steel. It's kind of like my experimentation steel. I got it for like a couple $100, and I got a whole bunch of it for a couple $100 shipped to my shop. So it really didn't matter to me if I messed it up. And I did that heat treat, and I hate waste, so I made a whole bunch of blanks and yada, yada, yada. I made a blank of that exact knife, and I just took that new top flat platen you see behind me there, the one that I built in that video. If you haven't watched that video, I'll put a card up so you can watch that. I just sat there and basically used that to thin this thing down a lot. This blade, in my opinion, is actually perfect. It meets all the requirements that I wanted initially when I started making kitchen cutlery, and that is that it's got a nice spine, it's not too thick, but a very thin, very smooth blade. All right, this one's not sharpened yet, but it's hard to pick up on camera, but this thing is really thin, okay? And it's got some flex to it, okay? And that, in my opinion, is the perfect knife. And I was chasing this perfection. For 2 days I spent just working on this and polishing it down and taking it to 3,000 grit and so on, so on, so on. What I ultimately settled upon was I liked how thin it was, and I didn't really care about the finish so much. And then I Googled it to look for validation. I thought, you know, why does anybody spend any time putting a mirror finish on a working knife? Makes no sense. To me, it's kind of pointless. It's a useful knife. It's going to get used. It's going to get scratched up and dinged up and all of that. My validation came in the form of that Google search when I started reading on the blade forums that a lot of professional knife makers do not mirror finish or even bring their finishes up to any sort of high grit for a kitchen knife or a professional chef's knife. And the reason is because when you do that, the food sticks to the blade, okay? And to me, that makes a ton of sense. Whenever you have a smooth knife surface like this is why you see those lines in like Japanese knives that put those little grooves down into the steel. And basically what that's for is to give the food something to not grip to, just so that it'll fall off of the blade. If you've ever cut a whole lot of food at once, for a lot of people, you'll know that just cleaning off your blade every few seconds, it just adds more and more time. So the higher polish you put on a blade, the more that becomes a problem. That's actually the reason why they don't do it. So anyway, long story short is, I thinned this down. I made it really super thin and it feels good in my hand and I love it. And then I went home and I looked at these knives that I had made and I thought, man, it's just not gonna cut it. Literally, not gonna cut it. So today, we're gonna kill our children. We're gonna take the handles off of these and we're gonna polish down the blades, make them thin, and finish these knives the right way. Yes, I have time invested in the original project. These took forever. But is it worth going back and making it right? Absolutely. I'm going to do that. And I am not excited about it, to be honest. I feel like this is it's a process. It's a learning process, I guess. And that's okay. But every time I use this, I would just be annoyed. And I can't sell this or give this to anyone because it's just not right. It's beautiful, but it doesn't do anything. It's not what it's made for. So, all right, let's do it. This is a euphemism for something, you know, going back and making changes, looking at something you've created, something you have in your life that needs attention. You have to go backwards. You have to take another look. And that's what I'm doing today. It's all about just taking those steps backwards to give it another look. Because ultimately, when you have that final thing, that product, whatever it is you're working on, if it doesn't meet at least your specification for what it should be, then what was the point of the exercise? What did you really learn? You didn't learn anything. You learned that you kind of failed. And it says something about your character if you don't go back and make it right again. Because you have the ability, you have the power to do it. You have the time to do it, to go backwards and make something right. What do you have in your life that you need to go back and make something right on? I know I've got a bunch of stuff, so this is just one of many. All right, so it's about an hour later, and we're getting close. The thinness is right where I want it to be, so now we're going to move on to hand sanding. You can see here my epoxy held up pretty well in there. That's not too bad of a job, so yeah, it is coming along. So chasing perfection, here we go. So that final belt was 100 grit. Brand new 100 grit CSM belt, and probably going to just go ahead and start with some 200 to kind of dig down into this. I'm not going to use new pads. I'm just going to start with whatever I got here. Little WD, 240. So I'm taking this up to 600 grit, and it's coming out pretty good. Looks pretty good. I had a couple of imperfections. I had to go back to the belt grinder and kind of polish them out. One of the things I was thinking about as I was doing this, yeah, this gives you a lot of time to think, by the way, is how many of these knives I've shown people, including my wife. And, you know, she gives me little bits of feedback, trying to, you know, dance around my delicate sensibilities and not criticize my work too much. But what I think is funny is that I essentially made a knife that didn't really work. I mean, it cut, but it wasn't, it's not ideal, right? So I think like in their heads, you know, they're looking at it going, oh, look, Brian made a knife. Isn't that cute? Brian wants to be a bladesmith. And of course, they're all very supportive of my projects and the things I want to learn and everything. So I think that's nice. But I think they also partially knew that I would figure it out on my own. That I made a kitchen knife that's not really all that great. But anyhow, getting there, figuring it out. A little bit at a time. All right. So took it up to 600 grit. She feels pretty nice. And then I like to just finalize this on the grinder one last time with a medium Scotch-Brite pad, belt, and then I put a little bit of that black compound on it just to kind of give it a nice little polish. But yeah, it's coming along pretty nice. Okay, so it's the next day. Yesterday was an all right day. I got a lot done, but it was really frustrating for me. I spent a majority of the day thinning down those blades. You know, I took the handles off and started thinning down these blades, and I got them really nice and thin. But the second one I was working on gave me a lot of trouble, and now I think it's too thin. And maybe not, but it's pretty thin. It's hard to see on camera, but also I'm having some geometry issues with bringing the taper all the way from the spine down in an even fashion. And when it got really thin, it became increasingly more difficult to keep this edge looking nice. So it started to get kind of wavy because, you know, there's different thicknesses along the cutting edge. And then I blew through two of my favorite Scotch-Brite belts. One just decided to implode on itself and slap me right in the face. And then this one, a big chunk of it came out. So it's like $30 worth of belts there. So I just stopped. I had to stop. I just went into full-on I hate knife making mode, and then realized that, you know, of course, tomorrow's another day and so on. And I had to give a presentation this morning for like 60 business owners in Naples here. So it was like I had a whole bunch of other stuff on my mind. I was really looking forward to, you know, making some progress on these. And again, I did, but it's not to my liking. So, of course, I start researching it and looking into it, and I think there's got to be a better way to get this geometry correct on stuff like this. And I am thinking about building a soft platen for the 2x72. Another knife maker had mentioned it to me, and he's got a kind of a cool one that sits like, it mounts right here, and it kind of sits here, and he runs his blades across the top piece here, which I think is an option. However, I was also thinking about building another one of these guys here, just for that purpose, actually. My biggest issue is if I make a soft platen, I know that I'm not going to want to unbolt the one that's on here every time and all that. If it's not convenient, I won't use it. So if I make another one of these, it's literally just pop it into the receiver. Also, if you've noticed too, the wheel's missing from this side. I don't think both wheels are necessary. I think this one is. I like this one up here because it keeps the belt from catching on this little guy right here and tearing apart. But this one down here is totally not worth having because you're hitting that small wheel attachment down at the base. And I could have pulled this down a little further and got another 2 inches of platen right there, which made it a little more comfortable to use. So I'm thinking redesigning this guy or making just a whole nother new one, which is in my process. So of course, one bad day of blade grinding has turned into another series of projects for me, which I'm okay with, I think. It's like this is part of the journey. And then I had an instance where I wanted to reverse the belt on this thing, and a while back had bought the reverse switch for the VFD and everything. When you reverse this thing, the tracking sucks. It's not precision. So I made this, and when I built it and when I welded the frame to the base, it's just really not perfect. Tracking forwards is good. I've got that down. It works really well. As soon as you reverse the direction of the belt, it wants to track to the starboard. It just goes all the way over to the right. And it's not really correctable with the tracking wheel. You know where I'm going with this. I'm going to build another grinder. I've got all the steel here. Actually, right behind me, there's a big stack of steel here. Tampa Bay Steel delivered it a few weeks ago. I've got everything I need to make another grinder, so I'm going to do it. And I'm going to film the whole process, and I'm actually going to break it down every step of the way. Try not to draw it out too much, but I want to break it down and understand all the geometry and how that works and how important precision is. So when you're making one of these, if you don't get it just right, it won't track right, and no tracking wheel will solve that problem. And I also think it will be super cool to have a second grinder up here that you can leave certain attachments hooked up to it or different belt grits and things, so you can go back and forth. It'll definitely increase efficiency. I think it would be really worth doing. So yeah, look for that in the upcoming weeks. I'm going to definitely do that, and it doesn't cost me hardly anything. In fact, I thought about this and I'm like, well, I'm going to have to buy a whole nother platen attachment and all that stuff. I don't think so, because I'll probably put the wheel on there, the small wheel attachment, and leave that on there and then move this guy over the other one. I think I got enough. I mean, of course, you never have enough, right? So, but anyway, that's what my plan is for the upcoming weeks. And also, I was putting a ton of pressure on myself to complete these blades by Christmas. And the time of filming this, it's right before Thanksgiving, and I really don't think that's going to happen. I really wanted to give my friends and family knives this year and show off my work and all that stuff. My work just isn't that good right now. It's just not. And I just started to accept that and realize that that's a bad idea. Don't give somebody a knife. So wait and do it right. So anyway, if you got something out of today's video, go ahead and hit that like button and that subscribe button. It means so much to me when you guys like and subscribe my stuff. It gets pushed out to the algorithm, makes my videos a little bit more prominent. Thank you so much. Also, there are links down in the description for anything you see in my studio if you want to buy something. It's a free way to support my channel. It costs you nothing, and a little commission goes to me, so it helps me financially. I also do have a Patreon page now, and you can support me monthly for as little as $1 a month, and that would be greatly appreciated as I'm working on expensive projects, and production equipment and time and all of that is money, so it would be fantastic if you could help me in that regard. If you do comment on any of my videos, I always read and respond to all of them. Thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving. I'm grateful for all of you in this beautiful existence we have here. Have a great day.